Renzo PIANO is here. He is one of our best and most prolific designers. Recently, he was selected to build a new home for the New York Times. This building will be his first imprint on the New York City skyline. Paul Goldberg of the New Yorker magazine says PIANO is probably better than any architect at convincing people that buildings are not just objects of shelter, but of poetry. Most well known for designing the Pompidou Center in Paris, he has won acclaim for other projects such as the de Menil Collection Museum in Houston, the Kansai Airport in Osaka, Japan, and the Potsdamer Platz in Berlin. I am pleased to have him at this table to talk about what he is doing here in New York and look back at a remarkable life in architecture. Welcome. Great to have you here. We will talk about this model here, but let me just talk a little bit about this. This is the first, will be the first major building of any size in New York.
Yes.
Since 9/11. Did you have any sense of the presence of 9/11 when you went about building this, designing this?
Yes, of course. Of course. I was here in New York that day, 9/11, with all my family and my child that is 2.5 years old. It was an incredible sensation. It was physically something that, not just culturally, but we were there. We were here. We've been looking at the building collapsing. It's a so terrible experience that in some way, yes, we got to think about that. But in the same time, as an architect, you cannot really start to find logical, technical solution to that. I mean, there is no possible answer. There is no possible technical answer. The only answer is to live in caverns. That is exactly what they do. So in reality, the thing we have been pursuing was more about security, panic, scale of the building. The big difference is, of course, that this building is going to be for, say, 7,000 people. That is completely different from making a building for 30,000. You know, that's already a big difference. And I still believe that density is a great thing. It's a great idea. Generally speaking, all cities, and especially Manhattan, this is what the city is about. It's a density and intensity. So, I mean, as far as you make building of that size, where the population is not immense, and you take care a lot to all the security and all that, I mean, I think life goes on, and we have really to learn, of course, as we have been learning from earthquakes, from everything, but we have to continue.
There is this about this. If there is one thing about your buildings that you reflect on, there are many, but one of them, and seems to be the most significant, is the idea of lightness.
Yes. Because, you know, Charlie, in some way, the life of an architect is a continuous fighting against gravity.
Gravity, exactly.
Against gravity. It sounds stupid, but it's true. I mean, as a poet works with words, and the words are light by definition, and a musician works with music, and the notes are light by, but concrete, steel are heavy by definition. Yeah. They have a very bad tendency to come down, you know. So in some way, the entire life is to hold things up and to make light. Of course, Manhattan is not that easy, because Manhattan is a city where, funny enough, the buildings become immaterial when they go up in the sky, but they become very material, very strong and hard when they touch ground. So the real challenge is how to get light in the air without losing contact with the ground. And the idea of this building is fundamentally is very typical of New York. It's a building atmospherical, I should say, but New York is atmospherical. Yeah. I mean, the beauty, the poetry of New York is that in a sunny evening, everything becomes red. Yeah. After a shower, everything is blue. I mean, the color of the building becomes the color of the weather. And so the idea that this building is made in such a way, the material is a ceramic, it's a light color ceramic, vibrant, and that ceramic will take the color of the weather, will change together with the weather.
So there you've got two skins. You've got a skin of ceramics and you've got a skin of glass.
Yes, and the skin of glass is transparent. You know, this is the reason, the main reason why normally skyscraper they have a bad reputation. They sometimes deserve a bad reputation because skyscraper are very often mysterious building, mysterious object. They are dark, they are mirror glazed, they are hermetic. And the reason why they are like that because they have to defend against the sun. And the way we do it here is by having this sort of fabric of ceramic that protect against the sun. But then beyond that, the glass is clear.
And as I'm looking at this, as the day changes from morning to the sun changing to clouds and the difference in the weather, I will see different colors.
Yes,
reflected
different
in this
color
building.
and
As
different
clouds come down.
and different vibration. I mean, by the way, this is not different from what is normally happening in New York. This is why New York is a great and poetic city. But we are trying to enhance this sense of lightness. And when we come to the top, and this is what normally happens, all skyscraper, and this will probably happen even more, the building disappear in the air because in the top. Instead of putting those horrible cooling towers, we put a Zen garden.
Yeah, there'll be trees here at the top of this building.
Yeah, we will put some trees, and we will, it's a bit absurd what I'm saying, but we will put there a place of silence and distance. I mean, you sit there, and you can see the infinite in front of you.
Closer to God, if you believe.
Yes, and anyway, the building is evocating this sense of lightness. You know, buildings are always a technical response to the need, but they are also telling stories.
What story is this building telling?
The story of this building is inevitably the story of a newspaper, and it looks like a joke. By example, the building at the top, we have an antenna that is made of carbon fiber and composite material, so that it's very flexible. And in a windy day, or even in a non-windy day, the antenna moves and stays in the direction of the wind. Actually, it doesn't show where the wind goes, but it shows more where the fresh air comes from. That makes a lot of sense for a newspaper. So the entire thing, all this is showing a very simple thing, that the building must be extremely well done, built, intelligent. But at the end, also it must sing, it must tell a story, otherwise...
Okay. Now here, let's talk about this idea, because you mentioned in passing, steel is material. You use the word immaterial, which is all these things, vibration, what?
Immaterial, of course, is a sort of nonsense for an architect because architecture is material.
You can't work within material.
But is material. But yes, I am talking about the visual impact of the building. You know, by the way, we have been testing this. We have been making model and mock-up. We have been actually even lifting a piece of the building up in the air 300 feet. Or 400 feet to see how it looked like. You know, we have done that, and the idea is that the building is still there, but it disappeared to the view. So the sensation you have in the street, or when you look at the building from far away, from another building, is that the building first is atmospherical, it changed together with the weather, and the second, it disappeared, gently disappeared in the air.
This building, interestingly enough, is on 8th Avenue between 40th and 41st. Next door is the New York City Port Authority, where people come in via bus. Their first entrance to New York, for many of them, coming across the river or coming from somewhere else in America by bus. The cheapest form of transportation in America, I guess. First thing they may see when they hit ground, your building.
Yes, and that's the reason why, I mean, we have been making a lot of work on the way the building touch ground, you know. Normally, skyscraper, again, are touching ground in a very preclude way. I mean, they come down to the street. I mean, this building, of course, comes down to the street, but it's totally transparent. It's totally permeable. From 40th Street, you can see through the building on the ground level, and you see the other street.
And you can see in the kitchen with chefs cooking. You can see whatever?
Yes, probably, because we will have a restaurant there. We will have a restaurant. We will have an auditorium. The auditorium will sit in front of a garden, that will be open to public. So you see the garden, you see the auditorium is actually transparent to the garden. So all this world, this is what they call a sort of a more humanistic vision of the city. It's more urban. The word urban is, funny enough, in English, in Italian, French, mean the same thing. It means urban, belonging to the city, but also behaving well.
To have an urban quality is to behave well.
Exactly. That mean to have a sort of generous attitude, and this is also another way to make an interpretation of a building that is about communication. But not because we show screens there, but because we just accept that the vision of the building is open. It's transparent, it's permeable. You see everything, you see from one side to the other, and the function are public, including an auditorium that will be public use.
All right, now let me make this point, if I may, and you help me. The newsroom is here, not in this building. And the New York Times will occupy a good portion of this building, but the newsroom, where the reporters, where the work of the Times is done.
The newsroom is like the factory. Actually, we call it the bakery because it's working.
The bread gets done there.
The bread is done every morning there and every evening there, and it's well done. And this is a great job. So this portion of the building is a bit like a magic lantern.
Magic lantern?
Yes, because it's always lit in the night, and people are there all day and night. and yes, the part where the New York Times produce news is there, is all that portion of the building.
Yeah, and the garden is right in there, right where
the garden is right in the middle. The auditorium is below this area on the ground level, so people will be able. Actually, the newsroom will look at the garden. And the garden will be a real garden, with rain, of course.
It was an interesting process in which they finally selected 4 architects. You, Frank Gehry, Cesar and Pele, and Foster. Norman Foster. 3 of them Pritzker winners, and the other on the Pritzker committee. Cesar on the committee. You ended up winning the competition. You once said that losing a competition is like falling in love with a woman. Falling in love with a woman, and then having her say, goodbye, I don't want you.
Yes, the bride goes away with somebody else.
The good-looking woman goes with someone else.
Yeah.
Here you got the woman.
Yes.
You got the lovely person that you wanted. What did the New York Times want? What did they want?
It's a very good client. It doesn't say too much, and they never told me exactly, but my guess is that they came to Europe, they went to see Berlin, they went to see the urban quality we have been trying to put in that scheme, the street life, and I think they were touched about the idea that this building should be more urban in the sense of the relationship between the building itself and the street.
Yeah. They said they want the building to talk to the street.
You should also never forget that the 6th Avenue and the 41st, 40th Street, they are a part of New York that need rehabilitation. Yes. In some way, is a rehabilitation place. So I think this was one argument. And the other one was probably the working condition in the office.
Okay, so they wanted to talk to the street, they wanted the working condition, they wanted to say something, they wanted to change a neighborhood.
Yes.
And they wanted to be part, I assume, they wanted to not only make a statement with the building, but they also wanted to be part of New York, reflected in their story, but to say something, have the building speak to the people.
Yes. If you look at the story of New York Times, you realize that in 1.5 centuries they've been in a very important building on the Times Square, and then in the present building that is, of course, missing some quality like flexibility and openness, but it's a great icon. So, in the new building, they got to think about a modern building, but at the same time without losing the quality and the fact that the building means something. Talking about working condition, this is the city in the world where the loft idea was invented. And then
in New York City, the loft idea?
Loft in Chicago. This is the country where the loft was invented. Loft is a flexible space, generous in height and in vision. And then it was a bit forgot in some way, because the office became more and more low. And in this building, by example, we have much higher ceiling than usually. And we look for transparency. Each floor is very transparent. So there's a combination of many things, going from the urban setting, the urban relationship between the street and the building, the soft presence, the light presence of the building, non-arrogant, and also, of course, the fact that the people should work in a better condition.
You have been called by Herbert Mouchon the poet of circulation. I think probably that idea first gained presence because of the elevator that goes up the outside of the Pompidou.
Yeah.
But you've always had a sense of wanting in your buildings there to be, even if you look at the Morgan Library, there is a sense of street connection and circulation.
It's true.
What is it here? Where is the circulation in this building? It's an interior phenomenon.
It's interior, but it's also exterior, because in the old New York Times floor we have internal stairs, but they are on the edge of the building. So people from moving from floor to floor, and they will move on the stair, because if you have a stair that is so spectacular, I mean, you get up from your table and you just go down or up one floor, and by doing so, you discover the city, and you rediscover the city. Right. I mean, you look at the street from where the newspaper in some way takes inspiration, you know, this kind of thing, and from the street, you see that movement. And, you know, in some way, the movement is a kind of four-dimensional architecture. I mean, architecture has movement as one of the dimensions. In the Pompidou Center a long time ago, that was a provocation, of course, with Richard Rogers. We are a young guy and quite bad boys, but you know, the idea of putting circulation on the facade was essential.
Yeah.
And it was adding a new
Why was it
dimension.
essential? Because of the nature you chose for that building? For everybody who, and many people, certainly all those who love architecture, and many people know of this building, it was really changed the nature of museums. I mean, you very much want to say that a museum is a public place.
Yes, and also we were young and quite provocative, and also a bit unpolite, and we thought that the right thing to do was to stop intimidation, typical of a great institution, cultural institution. By the way, I still don't understand exactly right now what is culture about. So no, I never understood exactly. So we thought intimidation is terrible, curiosity is great. Yeah. And it's true. Curiosity is the first sparkle of cultural attitude. So the idea to make that funny machine, or that kind of, people was talking about raffinery. But for us, factory, raffinery were great compliments.
Many people didn't know what to make of it. They said it looks like a factory.
Yes.
Some people said it looks like a spaceship. Some people.
It is a kind of spaceship. But, you know, in the cities...
This was, let me just remind people, this was in the early 70s. I mean, finally finished in, what, 77?
77.
But you started 71, 72 to work on it.
Yes. Cities have, since ever, spaceship. You know, even the Gothic cathedral were a spaceship landing in the middle of the cities. I mean, there's nothing wrong. I mean, you cannot think about architecture as a continuous process of balances. Sometimes architecture is an addition. It's not, you just add something. The idea of cleaning a big space and landing with a spaceship was an idea that created a sense of community, because the piazza became probably the first pedestrian piazza in Paris since a long time. And also, you know, the other frightening thing was that I was 33 years old, Richard was 36, and he was the old man. You know, and the President Georges Pompidou, it was a great guy. Yeah. He said to us, "You have to make a building that will last 5 centuries." You know, and we watched each other, and they said, "My God, 5 centuries for culture." We didn't know what culture was at that time, and we thought, whatever culture will be in 5 centuries. So we said, the building is made of 5 floors, superposed, completely flexible, and the connection then is something crossing, and going up and down and forever.
Now here's what's interesting about this. You had to come back several years ago.
Yeah, 2 years
and
ago.
fix it up because the paint had gotten in terrible condition. The building had gotten in terrible condition.
Well, the building was
It wasn't 5
visited
centuries,
by,
it was more like 20 years.
The building was, I love when it was getting a bit old like that, the kind of decadent, but it was really due to the fact that the building was visited by 150 million over 20 years.
The most popular tourist attraction in Paris.
Yes, and
more people go there than go to the Louvre. Yeah.
And culture, because half of those people are going to the library, and you can't believe that people going to the library are just tourists. So it has been used very much, but more than repainting, that is what you have to do anyway every 20 years. It was really about retuning the machine.
Redesigning.
Redesigning the internal, reorganizing the library. I mean, 20 years ago, nobody was talking about video conference. Today, they do. So we got to add a new space for video conference. Culture has been changing.
But you had to make some compromises, too. I mean, finally, Richard Rogers, now Lord Rogers, got fed up and went back to London.
Yeah, no, but that was much before. That was in '77 when well, we are best friend with Richard.
I know, it's not about you, it's about the idea.
Richard went back because Richard loved to go back to London. No, Richard was quite upset, and I was, a couple of years ago, because in the renovation of the center, somebody insisted about separating the access to the library from the access to the museum. And this was very sad. And also they wanted to have people paying the escalator. And we wanted to stay on the logic that the building is free. Everybody can go everywhere. Now, so the people will come, they are coming inside the building on the ground level, but as soon as they go up, they have to pay a ticket. For those reasons, Richard and myself, we were very unhappy. In the same time, we were so happy to see that the building was still loved and repainted, and some money was spent, that at the end, the final thing is positive.
Exactly, and you stayed there for the duration to be sort of watch.
I'm a kind of Quasimodo of Saint Pompidou myself. I live there.
Yeah. We should make these 2 points. In one, I said that it's the most visited tourist attraction. I mean, maybe more people go to the Eiffel Tower, but certainly I believe more people go to the Pompidou than go to the Louvre. It is that much of a magnet for people.
Yeah, it's about 7 million people a year. I think Louvre is about 4, something like that.
And there's now a restaurant on the top of it, which makes it even more attractive.
Yeah, since ever there is a restaurant, but recently was redone, and it's very well run by French brothers.
Right.
They are very good.
I know.
And then the restaurant became very popular.
Yeah. There's interesting things about this. It was inspired by President Pompidou, who then died.
Yes.
And didn't see it through.
Yeah, true. That was very sad. And Monsieur Giscard d'Estaing that came, I was sailing on my boat in Corsica one day, and I saw a police boat coming and asking me to come back to Paris quickly. I went back to Paris, and Monsieur Giscard d'Estaing wanted to cut 1 floor out of the building. And we got to prove that cutting 1 floor was more expensive than doing, so we were able to stay there.
We should say Giscard and Pompidou were political rivals.
Opposite, but also different person. And you know, but the funny thing, that's true, is that when on the 31st of January '77 we opened the building, half of the people, the big politicians, kings, princes, half of them understood only at that moment that the building was finished like that. They thought that was the scaffolding of the building. So they finally, that's finished like that. Yes.
We like it.
And I guess that the reason why we were able to do it, because nobody understood exactly what we were doing.
Some people will look at that building and they'll say, you're more identified, even though you may very well have done things since then and you had a prolific career. A lot of buildings, whether it's in Japan, the airport, whether you're talking about de Menil, which was a wonderful relationship between a patron and an architect. You built museums in Switzerland and other places. But you are probably, and this may be the new addition to your own sort of resume that breaks through, more identified with Pompidou than anything.
Yes, but makes sense because because it became a sort of turning point in a museum construction. Not really because the Centre Pompidou changed things, but because things were about to change at that moment in museum design. That was the turning moment when museum became more and more popular. And right now we are building and designing and building many museums.
I know. Why is that? Why have museums become?
I don't know, and I'm
they're
extremely happy.
They're the new cathedrals for architects.
Yes, yes, and I don't really know exactly. I just know that we are building right now, designing at least 4 museums in this country. And one is in Chicago, one is in San Francisco, in Atlanta, in Boston, in Dallas.
At Harvard,
Harvard.
Yeah.
But I'm very pleased about the fact that museum became very popular. There's only one concern, and we have to keep in mind that, is that museums are, at the end, place for silent contemplation of art. And too much of success may even kill the reason why a museum is a place for art.
Said another way, I think, the museum becomes more an object than the art that it's supposed to reflect.
This is the risk. This is the risk. It was not that case, by example, in the Menil collection, for the simple reason, first, because the Dominique de Menil, she was a great lady. Second, because the collection is great. And thirdly, because we got the good sense to accept that the focus there was art.
Yeah.
And so we didn't focus the attention, the energy in designing the object, but in creating the right space for contemplation of art. Anyway, you know, it's a good news that museums are a place of success. We just have to design museum in order to put together 2 different things. The profane function of the museum that is more related to conviviality, to pleasure, to be together, to buy books or whatever, and the sacred part of the museum. That is when you finally change the speed. You sit down quietly and the silence comes and you start your personal dialogue with a piece of art. So those 2 dimensions are not necessarily incompatible, but we have to design museums that can have that. Otherwise, the museum may be actually killed by the success, because then it becomes almost impossible to enjoy art. It becomes more like interesting, very interesting, but it becomes it's like in a concert. When you go into the good concert hall, yes, but when the music is there, it's a silence, and you need that. You need that clarity. In museums, sometimes it becomes more and more difficult. And that's what we are trying to do. In all those museums, we are trying to, not to separate, because they are not 2 separate worlds, but to recognize that you have a profane and a sacred dimension. And they 2, it's quite usual, by the way. It's also true for everybody, I mean, I guess. You have always that kind of contamination, that kind of contradiction, but it's absolutely essential in museum design today.
In the center of Dallas, you're doing a sculpture museum.
Yes.
In the center of that city.
This is Ray Nasher.
Ray Nasher is a great sculptor collector, right?
The idea is great. I keep saying Ray, that is a good friend, that is a totally mad idea, but mad in a good sense of the word. He bought that beautiful piece of land right downtown Dallas, and instead of making a new big skyscraper, he decided to donate to the city, in fact, a sculpture garden. And so this is on site. It will be finished by about 1 year.
You've often said that it's important for architecture to accommodate nature.
Yes. Well, you know, as an architect, you spend your life fighting against nature. Nature is not that friendly. I mean, especially when nature is in the middle. I mean, architecture is adventurous for that reason. You know, I built, by example, in the middle of the Pacific, a center for the Kanaki, for the local aborigines, you know, and that was built on the basis of a daily alert of hurricane, you know, and you know, in Osaka, in the airport, we got one earthquake by week, something like that. The biggest was the one that destroyed Kobe, but the building was finished, but the building didn't suffer anything. And so nature is difficult. And at the end of the day, our job, our profession, that is probably the oldest profession in the world, but quite.
But one.
Almost.
Maybe they're connected.
They are certainly connected. It's so complicated. It's so complex, it's so complex, that's true. But, and in some way I'm not worried about that, because architecture is art, is a social life, is anthropology, is history, architecture, is technology, is science, topography, but all this is aptly contaminated by money, power, and whatever, and politics. At the end, this is not bad, because in some way it's real, it's true, it's true. Anyway, talking about nature, of course, in the same time we love nature, and we fight nature. Yeah. So nature is a constant reference. And yes, in some of the building, I have an office in Genoa. My main office is in Paris, but the office we have in Genoa is hard to say where the building stops and the nature starts. It's the idea of the transparency. Again, the ambiguity. Ambiguity is a bad thing.
Ambiguity is a bad thing.
Ambiguity is normally, but in architecture is sometimes incredibly interesting because you create that sense of suspense, of mystery. And nature, the relationship between nature and building sometimes is so fantastic.
You come from a family of builders.
Yes.
A family of builders.
Yes. Everybody has been a builder in my family, from my grandfather to my father, my uncles, and everybody was a builder, yes.
Your brother? You have a brother?
My brother was a builder.
Yeah.
Unfortunately died, but he was a builder. And when I went to see my father to tell I wanted to be an architect, he said, but why ever? Why ever? A builder is God. A builder does everything. He doesn't just make drawing. And in his vision, the son of a builder was a better builder, that's for sure.
Why would a son of a builder want to be an architect?
He didn't understand, but then it's okay. Yeah. Then he didn't say too much, but still, I call my office the building workshop because I felt guilty.
The building workshop.
The building workshop.
Renzo PIANO building workshop.
So this is the name of my office
in Genoa, yeah. In Paris as well?
Since ever is called like that, in Paris and in Genoa. And we do a lot of crafted job, We have big workshop for making model, making mock-ups, and we do a lot. Of course, we use computers, but the crafted job, the work of trying again, the idea of manipulating material, wood, especially wood sometimes. It gives you a beautiful sense of three-dimensionality, but also this is something you can do with computer as well. But it's a census.
Have computers changed the potential of architecture?
Yes, in the sense that, right now, for example, we have an office in the middle of nowhere in Genoa, above the sea, and we work everywhere, in Japan, in Australia, in this country. And it doesn't matter because information are going through cable. Yeah. And also, of course, when you design, and we do design by hand and we design by model, but when you come to construction document, then you have to design by computer because the precision is mathematical, it's digital, and also you may give information to other people. It's not change in the sense that from a craftsman you become something else. You are still a craftsman, except that your tool is getting more sharp.
And more sharp, and you can use more materials, and you can figure out more what you can do with curves and shapes.
And the shape, and the complexity of the geometries. You can work on a very almost impossible geometry in the space that if you have to design by hand, you can't even find.
I had this big argument on this program with Richard Serra, the sculptor, in which I deigned to suggest that architecture was art, in which he almost physically was upset that I would entertain the idea. Do you believe architecture is art?
I think so. I think it's art, but as I said, it's the most contaminated art you can think about.
The most imposing, too.
And also it's the most imposing. This is true, because if you are a bad writer, at the end, nobody reads the book. And if you are a bad musician, it doesn't really matter. But if you're a bad architect, you impose a full immersion in a garbage forever.
Nothing you can do.
To everybody.
Every morning you get up, you'll see it.
You bear a very heavy responsibility. That's for true. But in the same time, it's art. It's art, but it's quite funny, because it's art, because at the end, it's about beauty. It's about beauty, it's about truth. You know, I mean, and beauty is impossible to reach. And probably one of the most diffuse sense we have as an architect is a sense of frustration, a sense of inadequacy. We are inadequate to get. You know, there's an immense gap between the vision you have, what you may think. You have an incredible vision, and then when you are just about to grapple it, you find that your arms are too short, and you can't. But this is not just for the architect. It must be true for everybody.
It is. I think for any creative process.
But the architect is particularly frustrating in that sense. So, but at the end of the day, beauty, poetry is what you are looking. And poetry lasts more than stone, you know.
Yeah. Poetry lasts longer than stone.
Longer than stone. And this is what but all this make clear that architecture is art. Architecture is about making shelter for human
That's why
being.
Richard thinks it's not art, because it has function.
Yes, but it's also about telling stories. Architecture is also about semantics, it's about allusion. Is about telling stories. Otherwise, it's not architecture. It's only the combination of the materiality of making building and the humanistic side of telling stories that gives sense to a place or to a building. Otherwise, a building has no soul. Otherwise, the building doesn't sing. And did you notice that some buildings sing and others don't?
Yes.
And that's the difference. They sing only when they have a soul. When apart from making well and making good building, you are also good enough to make allusion and to tell a story in some way.
Now take this for an example, back to this for a moment. You mentioned vision, and your arms are too short to reach the vision that's in your head and your mind and your soul. How close did you come to your vision here? I mean, think about this. The New York Times may be listening, but...
Charlie, this is an impossible question in the sense that you only understand when the building is finished, how much you have been close to that vision. And not even the first day. Building needs some time, you know. New building have a terrible handicap, that they are new. So they don't belong to the city. They don't belong to the ritual of the city. Have you noticed sometimes you go around in the city and you find the city beautiful? When you look more carefully, each building, you find that most of them are actually quite bad. Right. But the entire thing is because the memory, because the history, because the habits, because the ritual of the city made them beautiful. I mean, so in some way, a new building, even if it is beautiful, needs some time, needs a patina. It needs the time. Time makes things more beautiful, that's for sure. So it will probably need not just to be finished, but also to be there for a while to understand if the building is really reaching that level of quality and poetry. But of course, this is what you keep thinking every day.
Yeah, and in fact, there's never one judgment. I mean, it is like arts in that people see it differently depending on their own reference and their own sense of values they bring to it.
Of course, you have to think one thing, that even the classics, at their time, they were moderns. And you know, if you take Brunelleschi, at his time he was a modern. Now it's a classic. And Brunelleschi has been fighting. I don't try to compare anything with Brunelleschi's up there, but you know, I'm just trying to say that modernity is a funny concept. You know, modernity, and every classic has been modern at this time, and you know, so you don't really know what is good, what is wrong. This is one of the problems about architecture, is that it's rational, but it's also very much about intuition.
Right.
And you know, I have a great consideration for rationality, but unfortunately it doesn't really sing.
Yes.
it doesn't tell good stories, rationality. So intuition is more like, it's more like you know, when you sit down and you watch in the dark with obstination, sooner or later something will come up, but you don't really know. You have to wait. You have to be obstinate, but you have to accept that sense of anxiety, and all that makes it so difficult to judge. But intuition is still intuition. By the way, when you are 60-year-old, intuition is what you have been learning for 60 years.
It's habit.
So, it's habit. It's habit. I mean, take a great pianist.
Yes.
You know, the way I have great friends like Maurizio Pollini. Every time I look him playing, I mean, you realize that he metabolizes so much technique and capacity and skill that he doesn't even think about. Yeah, he closes his eyes and the hands go. And it's pure poetry.
The other thing that's interesting is that intuition, when you're young and have not been informed by experience, can be dangerous.
Absolutely. It's the most terrible thing to say to young people. If you are a teacher, you should never talk about that. And even, you know, I'm a quite good sailor. I love sailing. And my wife, that is much younger than me, is always surprised when we go sailing, and suddenly I watch around and say, better go back to the harbor. And a few hours later, you know, the wind comes and the rain comes, you know. And this is kind of thing that you learn by age. And so it's not really intuition. It's actually your capacity to metabolize things. That's the reason why the gesture of the hands are so important. The hands are important in our job. You may ask why. I mean, the hands because you sketch, because you talk to people, because you make model, because you break pieces. But the gesture of the hands are closer to intuition than to brain. And sometimes you are surprised about the fact that you don't really understand, but you start sketching. It's like, I guess, right?
It's almost like it's going without direction.
Yeah, it's like a writer. I know many writers. I've been talking with many writers. One is a good friend, is Mario Vargas Llosa.
Right.
He's a great writer, and he says, so many times I start writing, I don't really know what. But I do, and it comes. It comes. You know, sometimes the end goes faster than the mind at a certain age. But you cannot tell young people, because this becomes very dangerous, because this becomes what is called academia. Is when you are young and when you start to feel that you may go like that. You have, when you are young, you need to build all the defense. And they are emotional, but they are rational. And even emotionally speaking, you have to build capacity, otherwise.
Do you buy into the notion of the architect as personality, that architects develop a kind of signature and everything somehow reflects the signature?
This, for me, is a bad thing, in the sense that, of course, I have nothing against coherence.
Yes.
I think coherence is great, but
coherence,
style.
But diversity. I mean, is coherence the enemy of diversity?
Oh no, at all. You know what is good about our profession is that every time is a new adventure. You have a new place, new geography, new topography, new people. It's a new adventure. And if you are the kind of architect that comes and say, I don't care, because I have my own rubber stamp, then at the end it becomes like a grief. It becomes more, I mean, you become more important than the real problem. And I think this is bad. But if you have a coherence, that also means all the capacity, all the skill you have been putting together, you and your team. I have an excellent team. I have about 100 people working with me since long time, and 50 of them maybe more than 10 years, some of them 30 years, and we know each other. This is what I call coherence, because we know how to do things. And so the coherence comes out. If it's there, it comes out. Even if you make completely different things. You are in New York and you work for the New York Times and you make a tower. And the next day you go to the middle of the Pacific and you build something for the Aborigines.
Yeah.
How, I mean, anthropology is there. I mean, how can you believe that you have that you impose your style? I mean, what you may impose is your skill, is your internal coherence. By example, I love lightness. I can't tell you exactly why. I mean, this may be a stupid idea. Well, I know a couple of good reasons, because building around the world, you realize that 2/3 of the world are seismic areas. You know,
Yeah.
But the idea of lightness, for example, is something that is becoming a kind of coherence.
Okay, I understand what you mean by coherence now. Lightness is a coherence for you. Transparency
is one
is
of the
a
elements.
transparency is a coherence in part.
Transparency is exactly. But other things, for example, the generous relationship between a building and the site. I think this is another thing that. So it's not just formal. Is also functional.
When you go to a site, I'm thinking now, for example, when you went to Japan to look at the place you're going to build an airport, there was nothing but water.
In Osaka, when we went there, there was nothing, not even the land. So we went to see the client. We said, well, we still want to go there. So they were very surprised. They took us on the boat, and we went out for a half-day ride on the boat. And the boat was there, and we were looking, and all the Japanese were watching us and saying, whatever they do. But yes, but you inhale. You inhale, and also, you know, you have to listen, not just people, you have to listen places. Every place has a little genius, the genius loci, the genius of the place. You have to take it. You have to understand. Every place has a DNA. There is something in every place. I mean, of course, that day, nothing was there, not even the island, but the sense of a big structure, 1 mile long, was already there. So you got to think, and the imagination helps a lot. And I think being on the place helps a lot.
When you first visit a site, what do you see? I mean, do you see? You have no image of what you're smiling.
You know, you built up a kind of capacity in the time. By example, I flew from San Francisco this morning. And, you know, in the plane I can spend 2 hours designing building, but without doing nothing, just in my mind. Because you built your own hologram in some way. You see what is an hologram? It's a sort of three-dimensional design. And what I love to do when I work on the site, I was in San Francisco because we are designing the new California Academy of Science there. I spent 2 days walking around, making sketches, little sketches, watching again, because you project an image on the place. And what you can do on the place is something that you cannot do home or in the office. You can project the scale of the building. And the scale of the building is one of the things that are typical about architecture. It's the size, it's the presence of a building. You know, when you design an object, I don't say it's more easy, but the object is what you are doing. You do the object, it's there. But when you design a building, it's not that. The building is something else. It's immense. It has a presence. Now, that presence is something impossible to draw. It's only something you can imagine. And the only way you can imagine is by closing your eyes, working on the site. From time to time, you look a bit mad. Sometimes, or from time to time, you start to walk, and because you measure, you know, things. But this is what you have to do, because this is sort of projecting in a kind of your personal hologram the building in the space.
This New York Times building is between
It's
41st and 8th Avenue. It is a block away is Broadway, with a cascading flow and pulsating of light, you know. And this is not that, and you are very close to that. I mean, was there any pressure?
It will be in some way. First, because all the ground floor will be full of activity, retail, restaurant, and of course we will have all that signage. Secondly, because the building vibrates. The building is not static. I mean, in the night we will wash that surface from the bottom, and so those surfaces will vibrate. They will be not flash.
They will shimmer.
Yes, they will shimmer with the light of the city. So, in some way, the entire building it's part of that environment, in a different way, in a different scale. But and also, you know, yes, it's a great idea. 42nd Street is a great place, and I love that. I learned.
It is a wonderful place. I mean, they have made that magical.
But I think that what we are doing on the ground level, on the ground floor, for the first 30 feet from the ground to the second floor, it's very much in the spirit of that permeability and that transparency. People walking on the street around the building will be able to see, to watch, to inside, and they will be able to see what happened. And inside there will many things happen, not just people going to the office. We will have retail, we will have a restaurant, probably 3 or 4 restaurants, we will have the auditorium, we will have the garden, so we will have things happening.
Some things come full circle. It's my understanding that part of the reason that you and Richard got the commission to do the Pompidou was because you had a significant commitment to a public plaza there.
Yes, yes, it's true, absolutely true. It was probably one of the only project out of the 681 project of the competition. Can you believe that?
600.
How can you get a competition with 681?
And you had no idea that you could possibly win
at all,
because you almost didn't get in.
Oh yes,
by
we
time.
lost the drawings. They were not going to Paris. We were working in London. But yes, it was probably the only scheme where we left the piazza.
Right.
And the piazza is a great idea, because the piazza becomes in the middle, in the center of a dense city, becomes a sort of meeting place. You know, it becomes naturally, like by force, becomes a meeting place. So that was a good idea. And of course, the price we got to pay for that is that the building became taller.
Listen to this. This is things that you have said, and I want to just reflect on them before we close here. Architecture is rebellion. It is? Rebellion against what?
I think so, but not Charlie, in the sense that it's rebellion because you want to be avant-garde or because you want to be new. It's rebellion because in some way you as an architect, you have to believe in the capacity to change the world. I understand all this.
You have to believe in the capacity.
In your capacity to change the world.
Architecture can change the world?
Yes, you have to understand. You have to believe that. It's totally unreasonable. It's totally mad. It's utopian, but it's quite true. In some ways, true. You don't change the world, but you try to do. I mean, that kind, as an architect, you always look for Atlantis, you know?
You're looking for the...
For Atlantis. You have always this desire. I mean, Ahab on the Melville, and Moby Dick said, give me only big challenges. Don't give me small challenge. It's a joke, but it's not quite. I mean, you have to accept that kind of challenge. I mean, you have to believe that. Otherwise, you fall immediately in academia. And you do change the world in some way, a little, but you can. You can, because in some way, physically speaking, you can change in words. But you know, the Centre Pompidou changed in some way a little world there, in that part of the Marais. And in some way made a contribution to change the spirit of museum. I mean, Berlin, the Potsdamer Platz, actually the piazza we built is called Marlene Dietrich Platz. That was not easy, by the way, to call that way. But this, in some way, changed the spirit of the city in that position, you know. And the Menil collection also made something in that sense. I'm not saying I did, but I changed the world, but you have to believe in that capacity. Otherwise, without a utopia, without that sort of unreasonable desire and belief, you are lost.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
It's been a rare pleasure for me to talk to and about this great idea of changing the world and building buildings and affecting the way people live, behave, enjoy the world of architecture. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
The thing we have been pursuing was more about security, panic, scale of the building. The big difference is, of course, that this building is going to be for, say, 7,000 people. That is completely different from making a building for 30,000. You know, that's already a big difference. And I still believe that density is a great thing. It's a great idea. Generally speaking, all cities, and especially Manhattan, this is what the city is about. It's a density and intensity. So, I mean, as far as you make building of that size, where the population is not immense, and you take care a lot to all the security and all that, I mean, I think life goes on, and we have to, we have really to learn, of course, as we have been learning from earthquakes, from everything, but we have to continue.
There is this about this. If there is one thing about your buildings that you reflect on, there are many, but one of them, and seems to be the most significant, is the idea of lightness.
Yes. Because, you know, Charlie, in some way, the life of an architect is a continuous fighting against gravity.
Gravity, exactly.
Against gravity. It sounds stupid, but it's true. I mean, as a poet works with words, and the words are light by definition, and a musician works with music, and the notes are light by, but concrete, steel are heavy by definition. Yeah. They have a very bad tendency to come down, you know. So, in some way, the entire life is to hold things up and to make light. Of course, Manhattan is not that easy, because Manhattan is a city where, funny enough, the buildings become immaterial when they go up in the sky, but they become very material, very strong and hard when they touch ground. So the real challenge is how to get light in the air without losing contact with the ground. And the idea of this building is fundamentally is very typical of New York. It's a building atmospherical, I should say, but New York is atmospherical. Yeah. I mean, the beauty, the poetry of New York is that in a sunny evening, everything becomes red. Yeah. After a shower, everything is blue. I mean, the color of the building becomes the color of the weather. And so the idea that this building is made in such a way, the material is a ceramic, it's a light color ceramic, vibrant, and that ceramic will take the color of the weather, will change together with the weather.
So there you've got two skins. You've got a skin of ceramics and you've got a skin of glass.
Yes, and the skin of glass is transparent. You know, this is the reason, the main reason why normally skyscrapers, they have a bad reputation. They sometimes deserve a bad reputation, because skyscrapers are very often mysterious buildings, mysterious objects. They are dark, they are mirror glazed, they are hermetic. And the reason why they are like that, because they have to defend against the sun. And the way we do it here is by having this sort of fabric of ceramic that protect against the sun. But then beyond that, the glass is clear.
And as I'm looking at this, as the day changes from morning to the sun changing to clouds and the difference in the weather, I will see different colors.
Yes,
reflected
different
in this
color
building.
and
As
different
clouds come down.
And different vibration. I mean, by the way, this is not different from what is normally happening in New York. Yeah. This is why New York is a great and poetic city. But we are trying to enhance this sense of lightness. And when we but yes, I am talking about the visual impact of the building. You know, by the way, we have been testing this. We have been making model and mock-up. We have been actually even lifting a piece of the building up in the air 300 feet or 400 feet to see how it looked like. You know, we have done that. And the idea is that the building is still there, but it disappeared to the view. So the sensation you have in the street, or when you look at the building from far away, from another building, is that the building first is atmospherical. It changed together with the weather. And the second, it disappeared, gently disappeared in the air.
This building, interestingly enough, is on 8th Avenue between 40th and 41st. Next door is the New York City Port Authority, where people come in via bus. Their first entrance to New York, for many of them coming across the river or coming from somewhere else in America by bus. The cheapest form of transportation in America, I guess. First thing they may see when they hit ground, your building.
Yes, and that's the reason why, I mean, we have been making a lot of work on the way the building touch ground, you know. Normally, skyscraper, again, are touching ground in a very preclude way. I mean, they come down to the street. I mean, this building, of course, comes down to the street, but it's totally transparent. It's totally permeable. From 40th Street, you can see through the building on the ground level, and you see the other street.
And you can see in the kitchen with chefs cooking. You can see whatever?
Yes, probably, because we will have a restaurant there. We will have a restaurant. We will have an auditorium. The auditorium will sit in front of a garden, that will be open to public. So you see the garden, you see the auditorium. The auditorium is actually transparent to the garden. So all this work.
Renzo PIANO is here. He is one of our best and most prolific designers. Recently, he was selected to build a new home for the New York Times. This building will be his first imprint on the New York City skyline. Paul Goldberg of the New Yorker magazine says PIANO is probably better than any architect at convincing people that buildings are not just objects of shelter, but of poetry. Most well known for designing the Pompidou Center in Paris, he has won acclaim for other projects such as the de Menil Collection Museum in Houston, the Kansai Airport in Osaka, Japan, and the Potsdamer Platz in Berlin. I am pleased to have him at this table to talk about what he is doing here in New York and look back at a remarkable life in architecture. Welcome. Great to have you here. We will talk about this model here, but let me just talk a little bit about this. This is the first, will be the first major building of any size in New York since 9/11. Did you have any sense of the presence of 9/11 when you went about building this, designing this?
Yes, of course. Because I was here in New York that day, 9/11, with all my family and my child that is 2.5 years old. It was an incredible sensation. It was physically something that, not just culturally, but we were there. We were here. We've been looking at the building collapsing. It's a so terrible experience that in some way, yes, we got to think about that. But in the same time, as an architect, you cannot really start to find logical, technical solution to that. I mean, there is no possible answer. There is no possible technical answer. The only answer is to live in caverns. That is exactly what they do. So in reality, you come to the top, and this is what normally happens in all skyscrapers, and this will probably happen even more. The building disappear in the air, because in the top, instead of putting those horrible cooling towers, we put a Zen garden.
Yeah, there'll be trees here at the top of this building.
Yeah, we will put some trees, and we will, it's a bit absurd what I'm saying, but we will put there a place of silence and distance. I mean, you sit there, and you can see the infinite in front of you.
Closer to God, if you believe.
Yes, and anyway, the building is evocating this sense of light. And, you know, buildings are always a technical response to the need, but they are also telling stories.
What story is this building telling?
The story of this building is inevitably the story of a newspaper. And it looks like a joke. By example, the building at the top, we have an antenna that is made of carbon fiber and composite material, so that it's very flexible. And in a windy day, or even in a non-windy day, the antenna moves and stays in the direction of the wind. Actually, it doesn't show where the wind goes, but it shows more where the fresh air comes from. That makes a lot of sense for a newspaper. So the entire thing, all this is showing a very simple thing. The building must be extremely well done, built, intelligent. But at the end, also it must sing. It must tell a story. Yeah. Otherwise,
okay. Now here, let's talk about this idea, because you mentioned in passing, steel is material. You use the word immaterial, which is all these things, vibration, what?
Immaterial, of course, is a sort of nonsense for an architect, because architecture is material.
You can't work within material.
But is